I sit on the edge of the exam table, my leg bouncing nervously. The sterile smell of disinfectant and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights make the room feel suffocating. My arm still throbs from where Mrs. Fuller bit me, a dull, pulsing reminder of how close I came to dying. Jolene paces near the door, wringing her hands. "I'm so sorry," she mutters for the third time in the last 5 minutes. Her voice cracks, thick with guilt. "If I hadn't asked you to go over there, Lord, if I'd just gone myself." "It's not your fault," I say, though the words feel weak. My voice is flat, but I try to offer her a small smile. I want to comfort her, but it's hard when my mind keeps circling back to the same terrifying thought. What if I'm not okay? What if it's only a matter of time before I end up like Mrs. Fuller? My dad sits in the corner, his arms crossed over his chest, silent as ever. His face is set in that unreadable expression he wears when things are bad. He hasn't said much since we got here, and I can't tell if he's mad, scared, or both. Probably both. Jolene finally stops pacing and leans against the wall, covering her face with her hands. I can't believe this is happening. I should have known something was off when Gil came by. But I didn't. I didn't think. "Jolene," I say, my voice soft but firm. "You couldn't have known." She lowers her hands and looks at me, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening. "But I sent you there. I sent you." Her voice breaks and she shakes her head. "I'm sorry." Her voice breaks again. "I'm so sorry, Jay. I want to say something else, something more reassuring. But the truth is, I don't know how to comfort her. Hell, I don't even know how to comfort myself right now. So I just nod, swallowing down the lump in my throat. After what feels like an eternity, the door creaks open and Dr. Ambani steps into the room. He's an old man, his white coat hanging loosely off his thin frame, his glasses perched low on his nose. He's been the island's doctor for as long as I can remember. Normally, his presence is welcoming, but right now it just reminds me of how serious this is. He glances around the room before his eyes settle on me. "Jaden," he says, his voice steady but gentle. "How are you feeling?" I shrug, unsure how to answer that. I don't know. Scared, I guess." Dr. Ambani nods, his face lined with concern. "That's understandable." He pauses, glancing at the clipboard in his hand before looking back up at me. "We've taken your temperature multiple times now, and, well, I have good news." The room seems to still. Jolene straightens up, her eyes wide, and my dad shifts slightly in his chair, his jaw tightening. "It's been 4 hours, and you still haven't developed a fever," Dr. Ambani says, watching my reaction closely. "It's unlikely you're going to turn." I blink, the words not quite sinking in at first. "What?" He smiles slightly, the lines around his eyes softening. "It's rare, but it does happen. You're immune to the infection." For a second, the weight I've been carrying in my chest feels like it's about to crush me, but then it releases all at once, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My vision blurs with tears. Jolene covers her mouth with her hands, her eyes welling up as she starts to cry. "Oh, thank God," she whispers, her shoulders shaking with relief. She rushes over to me, pulling me into a tight hug, careful not to jostle my injured arm. Even my dad lets out a long, ragged breath, though he doesn't say anything. I glance over at him, and for a split second, I see the tension in his face ease. He doesn't smile, but I can tell he's relieved. Dr. Ambani clears his throat gently, pulling our attention back to him. "Now, just because you're immune doesn't mean you're out of the woods yet," he continues. "We still need to treat the wound itself, especially to prevent any bacterial infection from setting in. I'm going to prescribe you a course of antibiotics to make sure we're covering all our bases." I nod, still feeling dazed by the news. He steps closer, carefully unwrapping the bandages on my arm. The bite mark is ugly, red and swollen, but the infection isn't spreading, which is more than I could have hoped for a few hours ago. "We'll clean this up and get you started on the antibiotics today. I'll want to keep an eye on it for the next few days, just in case." Jolene wipes her eyes and steps back, still sniffling. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The doctor nods, offering her a kind smile. As he works on cleaning the bite, I sit there in silence, letting the reality of it all sink in. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to turn into one of them. I lay on the couch in our living room, the soft hum of the ceiling fan spinning overhead. Everything seems too quiet, too normal, like the world hasn't just turned upside down again. I rub my arm absently, feeling the bandages wrapped tight where the bite used to be. Immune. The word echoes in my head, still too big to really sink in. I should be relieved. And part of me is, I'm not going to turn into one of those things. I won't lose myself, my mind, my life. But sitting here, alone with my thoughts, I can't stop thinking about what this all means. My mind drifts back to the first time I saw an infected. I was just a kid, maybe 6 or 7, playing in the yard when I heard a strange sound across the street. A low, guttural moan, almost like an animal, but wrong. I remember watching a figure stumble out from behind a car. It was a man, or at least he used to be. His clothes were torn, hanging off his gaunt frame, and his skin was this sickly, palish gray. His eyes, though, that's what stuck with me the most. They were cloudy, vacant, like there was nothing human left in him. My mom yelled at me, pushing me inside and slamming the door. I remember pressing my face against the window, watching my mom load a shotgun from the porch. She shot the infected right in our front yard, and even though my mom yelled at me not to watch, I couldn't look away. That was the moment it all became real for me. I shake the memory away, trying to focus on something else, but my mind keeps circling back. Mrs. Fuller. She hadn't looked much different from that first infected I saw all those years ago. Just a husk, mindless and violent. The worst part is knowing she wasn't always like that. She used to smile at me, bring us food when she had extra. Now she's gone. A soft noise at the door pulls me out of my thoughts. Jolene steps in first, her eyes slightly red like she's been crying, followed closely by my dad. They both look off, upset, but more than that, I can tell something's wrong. Hey, I say, sitting up straighter. What's going on? Jolene and my dad exchange a glance before Jolene sighs and steps closer. We just came from an emergency town meeting. The board, they've been talking about what happened, about you. Talking about me? Why? Jolene crosses her arms. They think because you're immune, you ought to be out there. That you should join the fighters, help protect the island. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? That's insane. I'm not a fighter. I can't. They don't give a damn what you think, my dad cuts in, his voice tight with frustration. They've already made plans to start your training in the spring. My heart sinks. They want to train me, I repeat, almost in disbelief. Just because I'm immune, that doesn't make me some kind of soldier. I got bit today, and They're not giving you a choice, Jay, my dad says, his voice growing colder. They see you as someone who can take risks without the same consequences. They think it makes sense for you to be out there. Jolene looks at me, her eyes scanning my face for a reaction, but I can't give her one. I feel too numb. She exhales deeply. You look like you could use a drink, she remarks. Before I can say anything, she turns and walks into the kitchen. My dad scoffs and exits the room, likely trying to resist the temptation of breaking his 2 years of sobriety. Moments later, I hear the sound of glass bottles clinking together. Jolene comes back, holding a half-empty homemade bottle of moonshine and 2 mismatched glasses. She pours us each a generous amount and hands me one. To the end of a shitty day, she says with a weak smile, lifting her glass in a half-hearted toast. I take a long sip. The liquid burns going down, but it's a familiar kind of burn. One that grounds me a little in this sea of overwhelming thoughts. I don't know if I can do this, I admit, my voice barely more than a whisper. There's no point in hiding how I feel from her. She takes a sip and watches me over the rim of her glass. Not like they're giving you much of a choice. But I get it. I'm not a fighter, I say, shaking my head. My mom, she was a fighter. She knew what she was doing. And look what happened to her. My voice cracks at the end, and I take another swig of the hooch to cover it up. I remember watching her leave, gear strapped on tight, confident in a way that felt untouchable. But she didn't come back. No body, no blood, just gone, like the world beyond the lake had swallowed her whole without a trace. Jolene gives me a sympathetic look. You're not your mom, Jay. Nobody expects you to be. She sighs, setting her glass down. You're you, and you're tougher than you think. Surviving that bite, that means something. Yeah, but surviving one bite doesn't make me ready to be on the front lines. She shrugs. Maybe not, but if they train you, you'll have a shot at helping. That's all this is about, helping everyone. What if I can't do it? Don't worry about that now, she says, giving me a small smile. There's still 2 months till the ice melts. That's more than enough time to figure your shit out. Before I can respond, Jolene suddenly perks up, like she's remembered something. Oh, by the way, Gunner's waiting for you. Gunner, I ask, confused. She nods, wiping hooch from her lips. Yeah, he's been waiting outside for a while now. He wanted to make sure you're okay after, well, everything that happened. Gunner had saved my life earlier, shooting Mrs. Fuller before she could finish what she started. I hadn't really processed it at the time, too caught up in the pain and the fear of turning, but the idea that he's been sitting outside, waiting for news about me, throws me off. Why does he care? Jolene nudges me with her elbow. You should go talk to him. At least thank him. He's probably worried sick. I hesitate for a second, then nod. Yeah, I guess I should. I stand up, feeling the slight buzz of the alcohol warming my veins, and head to the front door. As I open it, I spot Gunnar sitting on the porch steps, hunched over with his elbows resting on his knees. His thick brown hair is messy, sticking out from beneath a hood, and his suit is covered in dirt and ash, probably from burning the infected earlier. He stands up when he sees me, a relieved look crossing his face. Jay, he says, his voice deep and rough, with a warmth that draws me in. You doing all right? I nod, stepping out onto the porch. Yeah, I'm okay, I guess, thanks to you. I look him in the eye, feeling awkward but grateful. He shrugs, looking down at his worn-out boots. Was nothing, just couldn't let the missus go and tear you apart like that. I can hear the shyness in his voice, like he's not used to being thanked. He shuffles a bit, kicking at the dirt with his boot. There's a pause, then he clears his throat. So, you going to spring fling? He asks, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I blink, a little caught off guard by the question. No, I wasn't planning on it. Gunnar's eyes flicker toward me, but he doesn't say anything for a moment, just nods slowly. He clears his throat again and shifts from one foot to the other. Well, you should. It's something nice to do. Get your mind off things, you know? I get the sense that maybe he was about to ask me something else, but the words seem to get stuck in his throat. Instead, he gives me a crooked smile, his eyes darting away like he's too nervous to meet my gaze. Before I can ask him about it, he steps back, shoving his hands into his pockets. Anyway, I should get going. You look like you could use some rest. I open my mouth to say something, but he's already turning to leave. Yeah, I'll see you around, I say, though the words feel hollow. Gunnar waves over his shoulder without looking back. Take care, Jay. I watch him disappear down the road, his form fading into the dim evening light. Something about the way he walked away felt unfinished, like there was something else he wanted to say but couldn't bring himself to. The same nagging feeling from earlier returns, but I shake it off. There's too much to think about already. I head back inside, my mind still buzzing with everything that's happened today. I'm immune. The board wants me to fight, and now there's Gunnar, acting all strange. Jolene looks up from the couch as I walk in, her eyebrows raised in question. Everything okay? She asks. I just shrug, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, I guess